You've probably noticed something strange about certain people. They walk into a room and opportunities seem to gravitate toward them. They think about someone and that person calls. They need a solution and it appears as if summoned from thin air. For years, you might have attributed this to luck, charisma, or some mysterious gift bestowed upon the chosen few. But what you're about to discover will shatter that illusion completely, because the truth is far more empowering and far more accessible than you ever imagined. What if I told you that buried deep within your psyche lies a dormant pattern, an ancient archetype that, when activated, doesn't just change how you think or feel, but literally reorganizes the fabric of reality around you? Not in weeks, not in months, but within hours of consciously engaging with it. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Has this ever happened to you? You wake up one morning feeling somehow different, as if you've tapped into a frequency you can't quite explain. And suddenly, that day unfolds like a perfectly choreographed symphony. The right people appear, the right doors open. Obstacles that seemed insurmountable simply dissolve. This isn't random. This isn't coincidence. This is the direct result of an ancient archetypal pattern within your consciousness, temporarily aligning with what Carl Jung called the collective unconscious, a unified field of living intelligence that exists beneath your everyday awareness. Now, here's where this gets absolutely fascinating and why understanding this ancient wisdom changes everything. Most people spend their entire lives trying to manipulate external reality through force, through willpower, through exhausting effort. They repeat affirmations until their voice goes hoarse. They visualize until their mind aches. They chase opportunities that seem to slip through their fingers like water, and they wonder why reality feels so resistant, so stubborn, so unwilling to cooperate with their desires. What they don't realize is that they're approaching this completely backward. Reality doesn't respond to force, it responds to frequency, and your frequency isn't determined by what you do on the surface level, but by which archetypal pattern is currently active in the deepest layers of your consciousness. Jung spent decades mapping these patterns, these fundamental templates of human experience that exist not just in your individual mind, but in a shared field of consciousness that connects all of humanity. Stay with me here, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. These archetypes aren't just abstract psychological concepts, they're living energetic signatures that, when consciously activated, create a kind of magnetic pull in the quantum field around you. And there's one specific archetype, one particular pattern that, when awakened, creates what can only be described as a reality-bending effect. When you learn to identify it, activate it, and maintain alignment with it, synchronicities don't just increase, they become your new normal. The question isn't whether this ancient pattern exists within you. It does. The question is, are you ready to activate it? And experience what happens when your consciousness aligns with the deeper intelligence that governs how reality actually works. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because there's a hidden truth here that most people completely miss when they're trying to raise their vibration or activate these ancient patterns within themselves. And this misunderstanding is precisely what keeps them stuck, spinning their wheels, wondering why nothing seems to shift no matter how hard they try. You see, the entire personal development industry has sold us this idea that high vibration is all about maintaining positive emotions. Feel gratitude, feel joy, feel love. And yes, those emotional states absolutely matter, but here's what they're not telling you. Those feelings are the effect, not the cause. They're the symptom of something far more fundamental happening beneath the surface of your conscious awareness. When you chase the emotion directly, you're trying to paint over a cracked foundation and wondering why the paint keeps peeling. The real foundation of sustained high vibration, the kind that actually bends reality and activates these archetypal patterns we're talking about, lies in the expansion of consciousness itself. Think about it this way. Your everyday perception is like looking at the world through a narrow window. You can only see what's directly in front of you, a tiny slice of what's actually happening. But when consciousness expands, when it aligns with those universal principles that have been operating since the beginning of time, that window suddenly becomes a panoramic view. You're not seeing different things, you're seeing more of what was always there, hidden in plain sight. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos where we continue exploring these deeper dimensions of consciousness. This is where the journey gets fascinating, because consciousness isn't some vague spiritual concept. It operates on an actual scale, a measurable spectrum that determines not just how you feel, but what you can perceive, what possibilities you can access, and how reality responds to your presence. David Hawkins spent decades mapping this terrain, and what he discovered was revolutionary. At the bottom of this scale, you find the frequencies of shame, guilt, and apathy. These are the densest energies, where people feel utterly powerless, where life seems to happen to them rather than through them, where every door appears closed before they even reach for the handle. But as you move up this consciousness scale, something remarkable starts to happen. There's a critical threshold, a turning point that Hawkins identified as courage. Below courage, you're essentially surviving, defending, reacting to whatever life throws at you. Above courage, everything changes. You begin creating, influencing, consciously shaping the reality you experience. And the higher you go, into acceptance, into love, into joy, into peace, the more you gain access to dimensions of reality that were completely invisible to you before. Opportunities that didn't exist suddenly appear. Solutions that seemed impossible reveal themselves. People who can help you materialize as if drawn by an invisible force. This isn't magical thinking. This is the direct impact of consciousness operating at frequencies where it can perceive and interact with the deeper patterns that govern how reality actually works. The transformation isn't about adding something new to who you are. It's about removing the veils, the limiting beliefs, the contracted perceptions that have been blocking your access to these higher frequencies all along. And when you understand this, when you really grasp the mechanics behind it, everything about your approach to life shifts. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to expand," if this is starting to click for you and you're beginning to see how this understanding changes everything about the journey you're on. Now, here's where I need to share something with you that might actually feel like a relief, because it goes against everything you've been taught by the mainstream personal development world. And this revelation alone could be the key that unlocks everything for you. You've seen it everywhere, right? The good vibes only mentality. The idea that you must maintain positive emotions at all times to stay aligned, to manifest, to activate these higher frequencies we're talking about. And if you're honest with yourself, you've probably felt that pressure, that exhausting burden of trying to force yourself to feel grateful when you're actually frustrated, to smile when you're hurting, to pretend everything is wonderful when internally you're struggling. Has that ever worked for you? Because here's the hidden truth behind that approach. It's actually keeping you stuck at a lower frequency while making you believe you're doing the spiritual work. When you adopt this belief that you must feel positive all the time, you've just created an impossible standard. And what happens when you inevitably feel anger, fear, sadness, or any other dense emotion? You add a layer of guilt and shame on top of the original feeling. You start judging yourself for feeling what you're feeling. And that judgment, that resistance, is what actually collapses your vibration, not the emotion itself. Your emotions aren't the enemy. They're messengers carrying crucial information about the invisible architecture running beneath your conscious awareness. Think of it this way. Every emotion you experience is revealing something about your state of consciousness, about the beliefs and convictions you're carrying, often without even realizing it. These inner structures, these deeply embedded patterns of perception, they act like a lens through which you interpret everything that happens to you. They determine what you notice in any given situation, what meaning you assign to events, what decisions you make in critical moments, and ultimately what patterns keep showing up in your life over and over again. The emotion is just the surface signal of something much deeper at work. This is why the first non-negotiable step in any real transformation, in genuinely activating these archetypal patterns and raising your baseline frequency, requires something that most people desperately avoid: radical honesty. Not the kind of honesty where you tell everyone else what you think, the kind where you look directly at yourself and identify exactly where you are right now. Not where you wish you were, not where you tell others you are, but where you actually are in this precise moment. Every single reaction you have to a challenge is revealing your frequency. When something goes wrong, what's your first impulse? Do you immediately look for who's to blame, scanning for the external cause of your discomfort? Or do you pause and ask yourself what this situation is trying to teach you, what it's revealing about your own patterns? When an opportunity appears, do you feel genuinely worthy of receiving it? Or does some voice inside whisper that it's too good to be true, that something must be wrong? These aren't just personality quirks, they're precise diagnostic tools showing you the exact frequency at which your consciousness is currently operating. If this is resonating with you, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who are genuinely searching for this kind of understanding. The journey isn't about judging yourself for where you are. It's about seeing it clearly, because you cannot transform what you cannot see. And the moment you stop pretending, stop performing, stop trying to convince yourself or anyone else that you're somewhere you're not, that's when real movement becomes possible. Drop a comment saying, "I see where I am," if you're ready to embrace this level of honesty with yourself, because this is where the real work begins. Now, once you've developed that capacity for radical honesty, once you can actually see where you are without the stories and justifications, something profound becomes possible. And this is where the real liberation begins, the kind that doesn't just temporarily make you feel better, but fundamentally transforms how you move through reality. You see, true high vibration, the kind that activates these ancient archetypal patterns and bends reality around you, has nothing to do with denying half of the human experience. Look at nature. Look at the universe itself. Everything operates in cycles and rhythms. The seasons change, the tides rise and fall. Day becomes night and night becomes day. This is fundamental law, not spiritual theory. And yet, we've been conditioned to believe that we should somehow stay fixed at one extreme, permanently positive, eternally grateful, always ascending. That's not how consciousness works. That's not how reality works. And trying to force yourself into that impossible position creates enormous internal tension that actually lowers your frequency. What actually elevates your vibration is something far more subtle and far more powerful: conscious acceptance. This is the capacity to observe emotions moving through you without being dominated by them, without collapsing into identification with them, without believing that this temporary weather pattern is who you fundamentally are. When you feel anger arising and you can create just enough space to say internally, there is anger present in my experience right now, instead of I am angry, you've just made a quantum leap in consciousness. Do you feel the difference in those words? In the first statement, you're the awareness observing the anger. In the second, you've become the anger itself. And that witnessing awareness, that observer perspective, operates at a naturally higher frequency than any emotion, positive or negative. This isn't just ancient wisdom or spiritual philosophy speaking. This is where modern science and timeless truth converge in the most fascinating way. Quantum physics has completely dismantled the old materialistic view of reality. What scientists have discovered is that everything you think is solid, the chair you're sitting on, the device in your hand, even your own body. At the quantum level, these aren't solid objects at all. They're patterns of energy and information, mostly empty space vibrating at specific frequencies. And here's the part that changes everything. We're only perceiving about 5% of what actually exists. Our senses can only detect a tiny slice of the electromagnetic spectrum, which means there are entire dimensions of reality operating all around you that you simply cannot see with your ordinary perception. When you expand your consciousness, when you activate these archetypal patterns and raise your frequency, you're not just changing how you feel about reality, you're literally gaining access to layers of reality that were previously invisible to you. And neuroscience is now confirming this through a completely different lens. Your thoughts, your decisions, your moment-to-moment choices about how to interpret experience, these aren't just abstract mental activities. They're actively reprogramming the physical structure of your brain, creating new neural pathways, and through the field of epigenetics, even influencing how your genes express themselves. Every single time you make a conscious decision to observe your patterns instead of being swept away by them, you're rewiring the actual hardware of your consciousness. This is the hidden mechanism behind genuine transformation, happening at the intersection where scientific understanding meets spiritual practice. Write, "Science and spirit unite" in the comments if you're starting to see how these two perspectives are actually describing the same fundamental truth from different angles. Now this brings us to perhaps the most profound shift that's possible in human consciousness, the moment that changes absolutely everything about how you experience reality. And it's a question that might seem simple at first, but when you really sit with it, when you let it penetrate beneath the surface of your thinking, it has the power to shatter every limitation you've ever believed about yourself. Here's the question. When you feel angry, who is it that's angry? When you notice a thought passing through your mind, who is the one noticing? Stay with this for a moment, because there's something extraordinary hiding in plain sight here. There's the anger, and then there's the awareness of the anger. There's the thought, and then there's the consciousness observing the thought. Which one is really you? Everything you've been calling I your entire life, that constructed sense of self made up of your personal history, your accumulated wounds, your beliefs about who you are and what you're capable of, your fears, your need to be right or look good or stay safe. This is not your enemy, but it is a severely limited version of what you actually are. This is the ego, and it's essentially a survival mechanism, a collection of patterns designed to help you navigate the world. But it's not the totality of your being. It's not the consciousness that's aware of those patterns. The real turning point in anyone's journey, the moment when these ancient archetypal energies truly activate and reality begins to reorganize itself around you, happens when you can step back and observe this ego structure without being identified with it, without believing that this temporary construct is who you fundamentally are. And from that elevated perspective, from that witnessing awareness, You gain access to a frequency that's naturally higher than any mental or emotional content passing through you. You become the space in which all experiences arise and fall away, rather than being trapped in the drama of each experience. But here's where most people get stuck. They understand this intellectually, they can repeat the words, they recognize the concept, and then life throws them into a storm, a dense emotion grips them, a challenging situation triggers their patterns, and suddenly all that understanding disappears. They collapse back into identification. They become the anxiety, the anger, the fear. And this is actually where the real test happens, where vibrational mastery reveals itself not in how you feel when everything is going smoothly, but in whether you can remain anchored in that observer consciousness when the waves are crashing. This is why knowledge without application is just entertainment, just interesting information floating through your mind that never touches your actual lived experience. The transformation you're seeking happens in those small daily choices, those moments when you catch yourself about to react automatically and instead you pause, you take a conscious breath, you create just enough space to ask yourself what's really happening here beneath the surface reaction. When anxiety arises, instead of collapsing into it, you say internally, "There is anxiety present in my experience right now." You welcome it with curiosity rather than resistance, asking what this feeling is here to show you, what old pattern or belief it's revealing. And you remember impermanence, that fundamental truth, that nothing lasts forever, not the pain, not the joy, not any emotional state. Everything is in constant motion, and this too shall pass. Put "I choose awareness" in the comments if you're ready to make this shift from understanding the concept to actually living it in those critical moments when it matters most. So here we are, and if you've made it this far, I want you to know that says something significant about you. Most people would have clicked away minutes ago, looking for a quick fix or an easy answer that doesn't require them to look deeper. But you stayed because you recognize that real transformation requires this kind of depth, this willingness to explore what's actually true rather than what simply sounds appealing. If something shifted for you during this conversation, if you felt that click of recognition when these pieces started coming together, I genuinely appreciate if you'd hit that like button. Not because I need the validation, but because it helps this message reach other people who are sincerely searching for this understanding. There are so many voices out there promising instant results with no effort. And honestly, we need more spaces where people are willing to go beneath the surface. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, consider joining us. What we explore here isn't about entertainment or feel-good content that fades by tomorrow. It's about genuine evolution, about bridging ancient wisdom with modern understanding, about giving you something real that you can actually apply to transform how you experience reality. Every video is designed with that intention, and I'd love to have you along for that journey. Leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me." If you feel like this video found you at exactly the right time. I read every single comment, and I'm genuinely curious about where you are in your own process of expansion. And listen, there's a video right here that takes what we've explored today even further. It dives into the practical techniques for maintaining this elevated awareness, even when external circumstances are challenging. Click and continue with me over there. I think you'll find it's the perfect next step from where we are right now. Thank you for being here, for staying present, and for choosing consciousness. I'll see you in the next one.